Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great day. In today's video, I'm going to share two separate case studies with you of our E2 investor visa clients that successfully got their case approved. So if you're interested in an E2 visa, this is definitely a video that you want to watch. So make sure to stick around. Hi everyone, my name is Michael Ashoori and I'm a U.S. immigration lawyer based in Los Angeles, California. At my law firm, we work with clients from all 50 states and worldwide, and we regularly post videos to make sure that you're up to date with the latest immigration news and tips. So if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button now. Also, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up so that YouTube knows to share this information with more people. As I mentioned, in today's video, I'm going to share two stories with you, two case studies of our clients that successfully got their E2 investor visa case approved. These clients got their cases approved in different ways, so that's why I want to share both of these cases with you. So as a quick overview, let's talk about the E2 visa. The E2 visa is an investment-based non-immigrant visa. What that means is that the way this visa works is that it basically allows somebody to invest in a US business. They can either start a new business, a startup business, or they can purchase an existing business. And based on making that investment, the person, if they get approved, can have the right to live in the United States and to operate their business. And there's a lot of benefits of the E2 visa. For example, the E2 visa can be extended over and over again without limit, assuming that the E2 requirements are met. In addition, if somebody is on an E2 visa, their spouse and their children under 21 years old can also join them in the United States on an E2 visa. The spouse can apply for work authorization to work in the United States, and the children can attend school in the United States as well. So let's talk about a few of the requirements of an E2 visa. One of the main requirements is that the investor has to invest a substantial amount of capital in the United States business. The regulations don't exactly specify what specific dollar amount is required to qualify as a substantial investment, but we typically recommend at least $100,000 or more. But again, I want to let you know that investments for less than $100,000 can also get approved, as we'll discuss later in this video. Another one of the requirements of the E2 visa is that the person that's applying for an E2 visa must be from a country that has an E2 treaty with the United States. There are many countries that have E2 treaties with the United States, including Pakistan, Germany, Italy, Turkey, Mexico, Canada, and the list goes on and on. However, there are some major countries that do not have an E2 treaty, such as India and China. So you want to make sure that you are from a country that has an E2 treaty with the United States. Another requirement is that when you invest the funds in the business, the investment must be put at risk. That means that the funds must be meaningfully committed in some way. They can't just be sitting in the business's operating account. The business that's being invested in must be an active for-profit business. So the business can't be some sort of a passive business, and it can't be some sort of a non-profit business. Additionally, the money that you use to invest in the E2 business must come from a lawful source. The funds cannot be obtained through some sort of illegal activity. It has to be documented that the funds were derived from some sort of a lawful source, like lawful employment earnings or proceeds from the sale of a property. So that was just an overview of the E2 visa. Now let's move on and talk about these two case studies. So the first case study is from one of my clients from Pakistan, and he was actually in the United States on a visitor visa. And while he was in the United States visiting, he decided that he wanted to operate a business in the United States. So after doing some research, he came to learn about the E2 visa. And so what he did was he began to think about different ideas for a potential business that he could start in the United States. So after doing some research, our client decided that he wanted to start a cell phone repair business in the United States. So our client was fortunate to have an uncle in the United States that was a lawful permanent resident, and his uncle helped him out a lot with this process. his uncle actually gifted him a substantial amount of the funds that he would then use to invest in his E2 business. Our client also received the remaining funds needed for his E2 investment from his mother in the form of a gift. So now that our client knew what he wanted to do, the next step that he took with the help of his uncle was to register an LLC in the United States, a limited liability company. So he set up this new business entity, and then after the business entity was set up, he got an EIN number from the IRS. The EIN number is a special number that's needed for the business. Now, with his newly registered business and his EIN number, our client was able to open a business bank account in the US for his business. After the business bank account was successfully opened, our client transferred his investment funds from his personal account to the business's operating account. So this is very important. As I told you earlier, our client received his investment funds in the form of a gift from his uncle and from his mother. Those two parties gifted him the money into his personal account. And then from his personal account, he transferred those funds to the business's operating account. Now that the funds were successfully transferred, it was time for our client to get an E2 visa business plan. So in the business plan, it lays out exactly what type of business our client is planning on running, specifically what he plans to do, where the business is located, what his marketing strategy is, what staffing requirements are going to be needed, how much capital is going to be needed to operate the business and to start the business, where the funds are going to be spent towards his business, and it also lays out projections for how the business is going to do in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. So this is a very detailed business plan, and he got that business plan created. So now that the business plan was finalized, it was time for our clients to actually spend the money towards his E2 business. So with the help of his uncle, our client went out and began to spend the money as explained in his business plan. He developed a website, he leased a storefront, he got a cash register, he developed a marketing strategy, he began to buy the different fixtures to be placed inside of the store. He bought the supplies and the materials that he would need and the equipment that he would need to successfully operate his business. And he got his business to the point that it was ready to operate. And again, throughout that process of spending the funds to get his business to the point where it was operational, he spent close to $100,000. Again, he paid for his lease, his website, equipment, supplies, inventory, and all that kind of stuff to get his business to the point where it was on the verge of becoming operational. And once all of that was done, it was time for us to prepare his case and to file it. Now, an important point that I want to mention is that our client was now in the United States as a visitor, and he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to have to go back to Pakistan to do a visa interview. So he wanted to know if there were any other options that would allow him to complete the process while inside the United States. So we told him about something called a change of status. A change of status is when you go from one non-immigrant status to another non-immigrant status while in the United States. The entire process is completed, again, in the United States. There's no need to attend a visa interview, and there's no need to visit a consulate outside of the United States. The process is completed in the United States by submitting an application with USCIS. So we explained the change of status process to him, and he decided that that was something that he wanted to do. Now, an important point that I want to mention is that status is not a visa. Status and visa are two totally different things. A visa is an entry document that allows somebody to enter the United States pursuant to the terms of that visa. Status is different. Status tells you what you're authorized to do in the United States and how long you're authorized to be in the United States. But status is not a visa. So if you leave the United States, you can forfeit your status. So that's just an important distinction that I want to mention. But again, after we explained this to the client decided that he wanted to proceed with a change of status. So now it was on us to prepare his case. So we compiled all the important documents of his case. We took his business plan, his bank statements, evidence of the transfer of the funds from his personal account to the business operating account, evidence of the funds leaving the business operating account. We included receipts for all the different purchases he made towards his business. We included pictures of the outside of his business, the inside of his business. We We included purchase orders for the inventory that he purchased. We included evidence of how his mother and his uncle obtained the funds that they used to gift to our client. Again, as I mentioned, for the E2 visa, it's important to document that the funds came from a lawful source. So we took all that documentation and then more documentation on top of that. I'm just listing some of the documents. We took all that information and then we drafted our attorney cover letter. Our attorney cover letter explained the case inside and out, everything that the client was planning on doing. We basically explained the whole E2 case in this letter. And we put together the entire case and we submitted it to USCIS. And I'm happy to report that after the case processed for some time, the case was approved. Our client got his E2 status approved for a period of 2 years. Now again, this is E2 status. So if our client decided to pursue his visa, that would be a separate application that would have to be filed with the consulate that he wanted to apply at. So a couple of important points that I want to mention in that last case study. As you can see in that example, our client invested close to $100,000 in his business. This was money that was actually spent. It wasn't just sitting in his operating account. He actually spent those funds towards his business. Another important point that I want to mention is that our client did a startup business. He didn't purchase an existing business. With the help of his uncle, he went out and built a business from scratch. And the third point that I want to mention is, again, I know I mentioned it several times, but in this particular example, our client did a change of status. He did not pursue a visa. So again, this whole process was completed inside the United States. Now, our client did not select premium processing for his case, but I want you to know doing a change of status to E2 is eligible for premium processing, meaning that for an additional fee, you can get your case processed within 15 days. Again, our client didn't elect to do it for his case, but it is an option that is available for people that are doing a change of status to E2. So now that we explained that first case study, let's move on to our second case study, which is another one of our clients that was based in Denmark. Now, again, our client was in Denmark and he knew that he wanted to pursue an E2 visa. So after doing some research, he found a business in the United States, and the business is a non-emergency medical transportation company. So basically what the business would do, the way this business was set up, is that it would provide a transportation service for people, for either elderly people or other types of individuals to attend their various medical appointments and stuff like that. Again, it's classified as a non-emergency medical transportation company. And again, after doing some research, he found that that business was for sale in the United States. Specifically, the ownership group of that business, it was comprised of multiple owners, and they wanted to sell 50% of their business. They didn't want to sell the whole business. So our client found out about this business, and he decided that that was the business that he wanted to invest in. So he completed a purchase and sale agreement. Our client purchased 50% of the shares of that business in exchange for $55,000. So our client's total investment amount was $55,000. Now, a few important points about this case. One of the things that the consulate wanted to know about this particular case was, what was our client going to do with the funds? What was going to happen with this $55,000 that was getting transferred to this business in exchange for the 50%? The consulate wanted to make sure that this money wasn't just going to go to the seller's pockets. The consulate wanted to make sure that these investment funds were going to be used productively in the business. So again, as in the first example, our client got an E2 business plan. And in the business plan, it clearly explained that this $55,000 was going to go to purchase additional vehicles for the business, which would result in an expansion and growth of the business. So he completed that business plan. And then after that business plan was complete, our client then, again, with the assistance of the owners of the business that were already in the United States, they went out and purchased additional vehicles as specified in the business plan. So they purchased additional vehicles, and not only did they purchase additional vehicles, they also purchased additional insurance coverage for those additional vehicles. So as you can see, the funds were transferred from this person's personal account to the existing business in the United States' operating account, and the funds were then spent as explained in the business plan. Now, a side point that I want to mention is that in this particular example, our client got his investment funds from selling a property that he owned in Denmark. So these were proceeds from the sale of a property that were used to invest in the E2 business. So again, now that our client had made his investment, it was our turn to now develop the case. So we included evidence of the various expenditures that were made, the vehicles that were purchased. We included pictures of the business. We included tax returns. So this is another important point. This was an existing business. So as part of the application that we submitted to the consulate, we included the tax returns of the business to show how the business had been performing in the past. We also included various other financial reports. In addition to those documents, we included evidence of the title of the additional cars that were purchased. We included the evidence of the insurance policy, and we included several other documents. And again, as in the first example, we prepared a detailed cover letter explaining our client's E2 case so that the consulate could see clearly what was going on in this case. After we finished preparing the case, we submitted the case directly to the consulate. The consulate then reviewed our client's file and invited our client to schedule an appointment for a visa interview at the consulate. At the appropriate time, our client attended his visa interview, the case was approved, and our client successfully obtained his E2 visa. Now, a couple of important points that I want to mention about this case. The first important point that I want to mention is that in this example, our client purchased an interest in an existing business. In the first example that we mentioned, our client started a business from scratch. In this example, our client purchased 50% of an existing business. He didn't have to purchase all 100%. In order to qualify for an E2 visa, you do not need to have 100% of the business. 50% of the business is enough to qualify for an E2 visa. Another point that I want to highlight is that our client's total investment amount in this example was $55,000. Now again, the E2 regulations specify that the investment must be a substantial amount, but the regulations do not specify what dollar amount is considered substantial. At our firm, we like to recommend that the investor aims to invest at least $100,000 or more. But as you can see in this particular example, an investment of $55,000 was enough to result in a case approval. So those were just some important points that I wanted to highlight. As a disclaimer on both of these cases, I want to make clear that this is just general information that I want to convey to you. This is not a guarantee about how your particular case will turn out, but these are actual clients that I wanted to share their stories with you so you could get a better idea of how the E2 visa works, what's required, how does this whole process work, and hopefully from these two cases, you can get a better understanding of how this whole thing works. But again, in this video, it's impossible to go through every single detail of every little component of the case and every single thing that took place. So I just want to caution you that this is a general overview of how these two clients' cases turned out. It's not a guarantee of how any particular case will turn out, but hopefully this gives you a much better idea of how this E2 visa and this E2 status works. I hope you guys learned a lot from this video. If you did, please make sure to hit that thumbs up button so that YouTube knows to share this information with more people. If you have any questions about any of this information, feel free to drop them in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for tuning into this video, and I'll see you on the next one.